Chosen one, there are truths about your life that only remain powerful as long as they stay protected, and learning what not to reveal is part of how you survive what others never see coming. Here's how it begins. Not with fear, not with paranoia, but with awareness settling into your body like a quiet instinct. Stay with this video until the very end, because what's shared here only works when it's taken in fully. And if at any point something resonates deeply, or you feel a calm certainty rising in you, write your warmest wish in the comments and add Amen. Not for attention, not for ritual, but as a way of setting intention and aligning your energy with protection that's already forming. Chosen ones tend to learn early that openness can be dangerous, not because the world is evil, but because not everyone knows how to hold what you carry. You've probably noticed this pattern already. The more you explain yourself, the more misunderstood you feel. The more you share your plans, the more resistance appears. That's not coincidence. That's feedback. Protection doesn't always look like walls. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like restraint. Sometimes it looks like letting people believe whatever they want, while you keep moving quietly in the direction you know is right. You weren't chosen to be exposed. You were chosen to be effective. There are parts of you that grow weaker when they're spoken too soon. Your vision, your next move, your healing. These things need darkness, not spotlight. Seeds don't grow faster when they're constantly dug up to be checked on. They grow when they're left alone to do their work. One of the first secrets chosen ones learn is not everyone deserves access to your inner world. You may feel called to be honest, transparent, real. That's beautiful. But discernment is what keeps honesty from becoming self-sabotage. There's a difference between being authentic and being available to everyone. Availability drains. Discernment protects. You've likely noticed that when you speak less, people reveal more. When you don't rush to explain, others fill the silence with their truth. That's not manipulation. That's wisdom. Silence creates space, and space reveals intention. This is how you learn who's safe and who's simply curious. Another truth is that your energy speaks louder than your words. You don't need to announce who you are or what you're becoming. The right people feel it. The wrong people feel threatened by it. And when you understand that, you stop trying to convince anyone. You let alignment do the sorting. Protection also means keeping your pain private. Not hidden forever, but protected while it heals. Some people consume vulnerability without offering support. They listen, but they don't hold. When you overshare your wounds with the wrong people, you relive them instead of releasing them. Healing needs safety. Not everyone provides that. Chosen ones often feel pressure to justify their boundaries, to soften them, to explain them, so others won't feel uncomfortable. But boundaries lose strength when they're negotiated too much. You don't owe access. You don't owe explanations. You owe yourself coherence. There's also a secret about timing. When you speak matters as much as what you say. Saying the right thing too early can have the same effect as saying the wrong thing. Your intuition knows when it's time to act, when it's time to speak, and when it's time to stay quiet and observe. Learning to trust that timing is part of your protection. You may have noticed that envy doesn't always look like hatred. Sometimes it looks like excessive interest, too many questions, too much curiosity about your next step. People who don't support your growth may still want information about it. Information gives leverage. Silence removes it. Another thing you protect is your emotional reactions, not suppressing them, but choosing where they're expressed. Reactivity gives others access to your inner state. Calm presence keeps your center intact. You don't need to win every exchange. You need to keep your energy. You weren't meant to live guarded all the time, but you were meant to live aware. Awareness is what allows you to move through the world without constantly bleeding yourself dry. You start to notice which conversations leave you energized and which leave you scattered, which people respect your pace and which push for access. That noticing is a form of protection. There's a quiet strength that comes from not being fully known by everyone, not because you're hiding, but because you're honoring the fact that depth is sacred. Not everything needs to be shared. Not everything needs a witness. This isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming selective. Warmth with wisdom. Openness with discernment. Presence without overexposure. When you learn this balance, life becomes less chaotic. Fewer misunderstandings. Less interference. More flow. You're not meant to explain your path to people who aren't walking it. You're not meant to reveal your next move to people who haven't earned your trust. You're not meant to make yourself smaller so others feel safe around your growth. This is only the first layer of protection. There's more beneath it. One of the hardest protections for a chosen one to learn is this: not everyone who smiles at you is meant to walk beside you. Some people are meant to pass through. Some are meant to observe from a distance. And some are only meant to know a very small version of you. When you give everyone the same level of access, you confuse roles, and confusion is where energy leaks. You may have noticed that certain people feel lighter when they know less about you. They relax, they stop projecting, they stop competing. That's not your imagination. When people don't have all the information, they fill in fewer stories. Fewer stories mean fewer expectations, fewer comparisons, fewer subtle attempts to influence your direction. Silence protects momentum. Another secret is learning to protect your joy. Not because joy is fragile, but because it's contagious in ways that aren't always clean. Some people are drawn to joy the way moths are drawn to light. They want to stand near it, absorb it, benefit from it, without contributing anything back. If you share your joy indiscriminately, you may find yourself dimming without knowing why. Guarding joy means choosing who gets to witness it closely. There's also the protection of not responding immediately. Chosen ones often feel pressure to be available, to reply quickly, to smooth things over. But immediacy gives away power, not in a manipulative sense, but in an energetic one. When you pause before responding, you give yourself time to feel what's true. You prevent yourself from agreeing to things that don't align just to keep peace. Another layer of protection is not revealing how deeply things affect you. You feel intensely. You process deeply. That depth is a gift, but when exposed to the wrong people, it becomes a vulnerability they may not know how to hold. You don't need to explain every emotional shift. You're allowed to process privately. Strength grows in that privacy. You also protect yourself by not correcting every misunderstanding. This is difficult, especially when you're misread. But clarity forced too early often creates more resistance, not less. Some people only understand you later, when your actions have spoken enough. Others never will. And that's okay. Your life isn't a courtroom where everyone deserves an explanation. Another secret is keeping your next move quiet. Plans are delicate. They carry potential that hasn't yet hardened into reality. When spoken too soon, they invite doubt, advice, skepticism, and subtle interference. Even well-meaning opinions can weaken resolve. Let your plans mature in silence. Let results speak when they're ready. You may also need to protect yourself from over-identifying with your role as a chosen one. This is subtle, but important. You are called, yes, but you're also human. When you turn your calling into a performance, you lose grounding. When you turn it into an identity, you must constantly defend. You create pressure. Protecting yourself means staying rooted in your humanity, not floating above it. There's protection in routine too. Simple things done consistently. Sleep, stillness, time away from noise. These aren't luxuries for you, they're safeguards. When you're overtired or overstimulated, your discernment weakens. You say yes when you mean no. You explain when you should observe. Rest keeps your boundaries intact. Another truth is that you don't need to be accessible to be loving. Distance doesn't mean rejection. It means regulation. You can care deeply and still limit access. You can be kind without being exposed. This balance doesn't make you cold. It makes you sustainable. You'll notice that as you practice these protections, life becomes quieter. Not emptier, quieter. Fewer dramatic entanglements, less emotional cleanup, more forward motion with less friction. That's not withdrawal, that's alignment. This is how chosen ones survive, long enough to fulfill what they're here to do, by knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. There's another layer of protection that often goes unnoticed because it doesn't look like defense at all. It looks like restraint, the kind that keeps you from reacting when something inside you wants to speak, explain, correct, or defend. Chosen ones are perceptive. You pick up on shifts quickly. Tone changes, energy changes, and the instinct is to address it immediately. But not everything needs your response to resolve itself. You protect yourself when you let other people sit with their own projections, when you don't rush to clear misunderstandings that aren't actually yours to fix. Some confusion dissolves on its own when you don't feed it. Some tensions reveal their true source when you don't rush in to manage them. Silence in these moments isn't avoidance, it's discernment. Another important protection is emotional economy. Not every feeling needs to be expressed externally. Not every internal process needs an audience. You feel deeply, and because of that, you may have learned to externalize just to regulate. But there's strength in containment, in letting feelings move through you without immediately giving them a voice. This keeps your inner world from becoming public property. Chosen ones also protect themselves by not oversharing their spiritual experiences. Insights, breakthroughs, moments of clarity. These are powerful, but they're also vulnerable. When shared too widely or too soon, they can be misunderstood, dismissed, or subtly diminished. Some revelations are meant to be lived before they're spoken. Integration comes before explanation. You may have noticed that when you share less, you observe more. Patterns emerge. People show you who they are without being prompted. You see consistency, or the lack of it. That information is invaluable. Protection often comes not from building armor, but from seeing clearly enough to avoid unnecessary battles altogether. There's also the protection of not chasing connection. This can feel counterintuitive, especially if you value depth and closeness. But chasing creates imbalance. It puts you in a position of overgiving. When you let connection form naturally, it reveals who is willing to meet you halfway. Mutual effort is a form of safety. Another quiet secret is not revealing how much you know. Your insight can be sharp, your perception accurate, but knowledge, when revealed prematurely, can make others defensive. or worse, manipulative. You don't need to demonstrate awareness to have it. Sometimes the safest move is to know and say nothing. Chosen ones often feel called to help, to guide, to support. That calling is real. But protection comes from knowing when not to intervene. Not every situation is yours to heal. Not every person is ready. Overextension drains energy and creates resentment. Service without boundaries becomes self-erasure. You also protect yourself by keeping your standards private, not announcing what you expect, not negotiating your values publicly. You live them quietly, consistently. Those who align will adjust naturally. Those who don't will drift. You don't need to explain the shift. The shift speaks for itself. There's strength in letting people underestimate you. It keeps you free from their expectations. It allows you to move without interference. When people think they know you, they stop watching closely. That space gives you room to grow without pressure. This stage of protection isn't about hiding. It's about stewardship of your energy, your focus, your becoming. You're learning that access is earned over time, not granted automatically. And as you practice this, something stabilizes inside you. Less emotional whiplash. Fewer regrets about what you said too soon or gave too freely. More peace, more clarity. Protection, you're learning, isn't fear-based. It's wisdom in motion. There's a deeper kind of protection that begins to form here. And it's not about other people at all. It's about how you relate to yourself. Chosen ones often leak energy by doubting their own inner signals, by second-guessing what they felt clearly the first time. You protect yourself the moment you stop arguing with your intuition. You've noticed it before, that first quiet knowing, the one that arrives without drama, without explanation. And then the mind steps in. It asks for proof. It worries about being wrong. It wants reassurance from outside. Each time you override that initial knowing, you weaken trust with yourself. And when self-trust weakens, you start looking outward for validation that was never meant to come from there. Protection means honoring your first signal more often than not. It doesn't mean you'll never adjust or learn. It means you stop betraying yourself just to stay comfortable or liked. That shift alone saves enormous energy. Another secret is learning to protect your pace. You move differently than others. You process deeply. You integrate slowly, then act decisively. When you let other people rush you, you disconnect from your natural rhythm. That's when mistakes happen. Not because you're incapable, but because you moved out of alignment with your own timing. You don't owe anyone speed. You owe yourself accuracy. Chosen ones also protect themselves by not living in constant explanation mode, explaining your choices, your boundaries, your silence, your growth. Explanation drains power because it places your life in a defensive posture. You start living as if your decisions need approval. They don't. You are allowed to choose quietly. There's also protection in not taking things personally that were never about you. People project, they compare, they react to what you represent, not who you actually are. When you absorb those reactions as truth, you carry weight that doesn't belong to you. Learning to let reactions pass through without lodging inside you is a form of emotional immunity. Another layer of protection is knowing when to disengage internally, not just externally. You may still be in the room, still part of the conversation, but you stop emotionally investing in outcomes that aren't yours to control. That internal disengagement keeps your center intact even when circumstances are messy. You also protect yourself by not making every thought sacred. Chosen ones think deeply, but not every thought is guidance. Some are echoes of old fears, old conditioning, old wounds. Learning to observe your thoughts instead of obeying them keeps you from building your life around temporary mental weather. There's strength in discernment here. You begin to notice the difference between intuition and anxiety, between caution and fear, between stillness and avoidance. That discernment sharpens over time, and with it, your ability to move cleanly through situations that once drained you. Another quiet protection is not revealing how much you care. You care deeply, intensely, but when that care is placed in the wrong hands, it becomes leverage. You don't become indifferent. You become selective. You let people earn access to that depth instead of assuming they know how to hold it. You may notice that as you practice this, fewer things trigger you. Not because you're numb, but because you're no longer hooked. You don't chase resolution where there is none. You don't try to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. This is where your energy consolidates, where your inner world feels less invaded, less scattered. You're still open, still compassionate, but you're no longer porous. Protection at this level isn't about hiding. It's about alignment with yourself, so strong that external noise loses its power. And once that alignment is established, the rest becomes easier to navigate. By this stage, protection stops feeling like something you're doing and starts feeling like something you are. It's no longer a list of rules you have to remember. It's a posture, a way you stand in your own life. You don't tighten up. You don't scan for threats. You simply don't open doors that no longer feel right. One of the biggest shifts here is that you stop explaining your silence. You used to feel guilty for pulling back, for not answering right away, for needing space. Now you understand that silence is not neglect. It's calibration. It's how you come back to center when the world gets loud. And you no longer apologize for it. Chosen ones often give too much context, too many reasons, too much access to their internal process. That habit comes from wanting to be understood. But you've learned something important now. Being understood by everyone is not the goal. Being aligned with yourself is. The more aligned you are, the less explanation you need. You also begin to protect your future self. This is subtle, but powerful. You think ahead energetically. You ask, if I say yes to this, what will it cost me later? Not just time, but clarity, peace, focus. If the cost is too high, you decline without drama. No long justifications, no emotional cleanup afterward. That's wisdom earned. Another protection that settles in here is discernment around obligation. You recognize how often should has been used to pull you off your path. You don't rebel against responsibility, but you question it now. Is this truly mine to carry? Or am I picking it up because I'm capable, empathetic, available? You put down what was never yours. You may notice that your circle naturally becomes smaller. Not because you're withdrawing, but because your standards are clearer. You don't force closeness. You allow it to develop slowly. People who can meet you in honesty, respect, and consistency remain. Others fade. There's less resentment in this now, less confusion. It feels natural. There's also protection in how you speak about your life. You don't oversell. You don't undersell. You don't invite opinions by oversharing half-formed thoughts. You speak from grounded truth, or you don't speak at all. This keeps your energy intact. It keeps your direction steady. Chosen ones at this stage stop trying to manage other people's perceptions. That was exhausting. You let people think what they think. You let misunderstandings exist if they aren't harmful. You don't correct every narrative. You don't chase clarity that only serves someone else's comfort. That release gives you back enormous amounts of energy. You also become more selective about where you place your emotional labor. You notice when conversations loop without resolution, when someone wants your insight but not your truth, when support flows one way. You don't confront every imbalance. Sometimes you simply step back. Distance becomes a form of clarity. There's a quiet confidence here that doesn't need validation. You trust yourself enough to know when something feels off, even if you can't explain why yet. You don't override that signal anymore. You wait. And waiting, you've learned, is often the most protective move of all. This phase isn't about becoming closed, it's about becoming contained, whole, less porous. You're still kind, still present, still willing to connect. But connection no longer costs you your center, and that's when protection stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like peace. And finally, there's a protection that doesn't announce itself at all. It feels like calm, like groundedness, like knowing, without needing to think about it, that you are safe inside yourself. This is where everything you've been learning settles into your nervous system, not just your mind. You no longer move from fear of being hurt, misunderstood, or drained. You move from self-respect. That's the difference. Fear tightens. Self-respect steadies. When you act from steadiness, you don't overreact, over-explain, or overextend. You respond with proportion, with clarity, with a sense of inner order that doesn't get shaken easily. This is where chosen ones stop living in anticipation of disruption. You're no longer bracing for the next emotional wave, the next misunderstanding, the next test. Not because challenges disappear, but because you trust your ability to meet them without losing yourself. That trust is earned. It comes from honoring your boundaries, your timing, your intuition again and again. There's also a deep peace in realizing you don't need to be seen to be protected. Visibility and safety are not the same thing. You don't need to share your inner world publicly for it to be real. Some of the most powerful transformations happen quietly, away from commentary, away from opinion. You let those changes root before you let them show. At this stage, you recognize that protection is not isolation. You still love, you still connect, you still care, but you do it without self-erasure. You don't disappear into relationships. You don't abandon your center to keep others comfortable. You bring yourself fully, and you leave fully when alignment ends. You may notice that your reactions are fewer now. Less emotional turbulence, less need to resolve everything immediately. You're comfortable letting time reveal what's true. You've learned that urgency often belongs to confusion, not clarity. And you no longer let confusion rush you. There's also a maturity in how you handle trust. You don't withhold it completely. You don't give it blindly. You let it build through consistency, through actions over time, through how someone treats your boundaries when they think no one is watching. That discernment keeps your heart open without making it vulnerable to misuse. This final layer of protection is knowing that you are responsible for your energy, not for managing everyone else's reactions to it. You don't shrink your light to avoid being noticed. You don't dim your truth to avoid discomfort. You simply live honestly and let others adjust as they will. And with that, something settles for good. A sense of inner safety that doesn't depend on circumstances. A knowing that no matter where you are or who you're with, you can return to yourself. That return is your anchor. You were never meant to live exposed and reactive. You were meant to live aware and grounded, and now you do. And this last layer doesn't feel like a lesson anymore. It feels like home, like something you've always known but didn't have language for until now. You move through the world with less friction, not because the world changed, but because you did. Your center holds. You're no longer trying to stay one step ahead of danger. You're not scanning rooms, conversations, or relationships for what might go wrong. That hyper-alertness was never intuition. It was survival. And survival has finally loosened its grip on you. In its place is presence. Quiet, steady, awake. You trust yourself enough now to let things unfold without controlling them. You don't rush to fix, rescue, or manage outcomes. You've learned that interference often weakens what patience would strengthen. So you wait when waiting feels right. You act when acting feels clean. That internal calibration keeps you safe more than any external strategy ever could. There's also a deep protection in not needing to be right. You don't argue to prove truth. You don't defend your perspective just to feel secure. You let reality confirm what matters over time. This saves you from unnecessary conflict and keeps your energy focused on creation instead of correction. You may notice that your sense of identity feels simpler now, less layered with roles you had to play, less defined by how others perceive you. You know who you are when no one is watching. That private knowing is grounding. It means external validation can't easily pull you off course. Chosen ones often carry responsibility early, and that can create an unconscious belief that everything depends on them. This phase releases that weight. You understand now that you are responsible for your alignment, not for holding the world together. You do your part. You let the rest unfold. That balance restores strength without burden. You're also more comfortable with endings, conversations that no longer resonate, roles that have expired, relationships that served their season. You don't cling, you don't dramatize, you let things close cleanly. Endings stop feeling like failure and start feeling like precision. Another quiet protection emerges here. You stop oversharing your interpretations of events. You observe, you feel, you decide internally. You don't narrate every realization out loud. That restraint keeps your inner world intact. It gives your wisdom time to mature before it's spoken, if it ever needs to be. You're not afraid of depth anymore, but you're also not pulled toward intensity for its own sake. You choose environments that support your nervous system, not just your ambition. You choose people who respect your pace, not just your potential. Those choices compound into peace. This is where protection becomes invisible. No rules, no walls, just alignment so strong that misaligned things don't stick. They pass by. They reveal themselves early. They dissolve without drama. You don't need to announce that you're protected. You don't need to explain how you've changed. Your life reflects it, in what you allow, in what you decline, in how you remain steady even when others aren't. And from here, you continue forward, not armored, not hidden, but grounded, carrying your sensitivity as strength, your awareness as guidance, your silence as wisdom. This is what it looks like when a chosen one stops leaking energy and starts living from center. At this point, protection feels less like something you do, and more like something that naturally surrounds you, like a field, like a quiet boundary that doesn't need explanation. You're not thinking, I need to protect myself. You're simply living in a way that makes intrusion difficult. You've learned the difference between curiosity and access. People may still be curious about you, about how you think, about where you're going, But curiosity doesn't equal permission anymore. You don't feel obligated to satisfy it. You let questions exist without answering them fully. That alone keeps your inner world intact. There's also a subtle shift in how you handle pressure. When someone tries to rush you, emotionally or practically, you feel it immediately. And instead of complying to relieve the tension, you slow down. You create space. You let the pressure reveal its source. Often, it has nothing to do with you. And once you see that, it loses its power. You're no longer available for dynamics that thrive on urgency. Chaos used to feel familiar, even normal. Now, it feels loud, unnecessary. You don't judge it. You just don't stay in it. That choice protects your nervous system, and a regulated nervous system is one of the strongest forms of spiritual protection there is. Another quiet change. You stop giving people access to your doubt. You may still have doubts. That's human. But you no longer process them publicly. You don't hand them to people who might amplify them, misuse them, or confuse them with weakness. You sit with your doubts privately until clarity forms. That restraint keeps your confidence from being shaped by outside voices. You also protect yourself by not over-identifying with your empathy. You care deeply, but you've learned that feeling someone's pain doesn't mean you're responsible for fixing it. You can witness without absorbing. You can support without carrying. That distinction saves your energy in ways you didn't understand before. There's protection in how you end conversations now. You don't linger when something feels complete. You don't keep explaining just to soften an exit. You trust the feeling of closure. Clean endings keep energy from looping. They free you to move forward without emotional residue. You may notice that your intuition speaks faster than your fear now. The signal comes, and you trust it before the mind has time to argue. That trust wasn't built overnight. It was earned through choosing alignment again and again, even when it was uncomfortable. That makes your decisions quieter and more accurate. This stage is also marked by a lack of need for witnesses. You don't need people to see your growth, your discipline, your restraint. You know, and that knowing is enough. When validation is no longer required, manipulation loses its entry point. Protection here is deeply tied to self-loyalty. You don't abandon yourself to keep peace. You don't betray your instincts to avoid conflict. You don't silence yourself internally just to appear agreeable externally. That loyalty creates an internal coherence that very little can penetrate. You still move through the world, open, human, relational. But there's an invisible filter now. What aligns passes through. What doesn't linger. And because you're no longer forcing anything, this filtering happens without effort. This is the kind of protection that doesn't harden you. It refines you. And from this place, you continue, not guarded, not naive, but deeply rooted in yourself, able to recognize what belongs and what doesn't the moment it appears. By now, protection has become instinctive. You don't pause to calculate it. You feel it, like a subtle tightening in your chest when something is off, or a calm openness when something is right. Your body knows before your mind catches up, and you've learned to trust that language. That trust keeps you from walking into situations you once would have rationalized your way into. One of the quietest but strongest protections at this stage is discernment around timing. You don't reveal things at their most fragile point anymore. You let ideas mature. You let healing settle. You let clarity harden into certainty before you speak. This doesn't make you secretive. It makes you precise. Precision saves energy. You also begin to protect your inner narrative. You're careful about how you talk to yourself about your life. You don't dramatize setbacks. You don't romanticize struggle. You describe things accurately without turning them into identity. That accuracy keeps you grounded. It prevents temporary moments from becoming permanent stories. Another shift happens in how you deal with disappointment. You no longer broadcast it. You don't collapse into it. You feel it fully, privately, and then you let it move through you. That containment keeps disappointment from becoming discouragement. It allows resilience to build quietly instead of being forced. You may notice that people test you less now, not because they suddenly respect you more, but because your energy no longer invites testing. You're clear without being rigid, calm without being passive, boundaried without being defensive. That combination signals self-possession, and self-possession naturally discourages intrusion. There's also protection in how you handle praise. You don't absorb it too deeply. You appreciate it without letting it inflate you or define you. Praise used to pull you outward, into performance. Now, it passes through without altering your center. That neutrality keeps you free. You've learned to protect yourself from over-identifying with roles. Helper, leader, strong one, wise one. Those roles once gave you purpose, but they also drained you. Now you let them be expressions, not obligations. You step into them when aligned and step back when tired. That flexibility keeps burnout away. This stage brings a deeper relationship with solitude. Not isolation, solitude. Time where you're not processing, fixing, or preparing, just being. That space recalibrates you regularly. It clears residue you didn't even realize you were carrying. Solitude becomes maintenance, not escape. You also stop internalizing other people's urgency, their panic, their timelines, their pressure. You listen without absorbing. You respond without rushing. You understand now that urgency is often a sign of misalignment, not importance. That understanding protects your decision-making. What's most noticeable in this phase is how little explanation your life requires. You don't narrate transitions. You don't justify changes. You let actions speak slowly, consistently. That steadiness builds credibility without cost. Protection here is subtle but strong. It doesn't isolate you from life. It allows you to move through it with clarity intact. You remain open, but not exposed. Present, but not available to everything. This is the stage where you realize protection isn't about building barriers against the world. It's about living in such alignment with yourself that the world can't pull you off center anymore. And now, you reach the final layer, the one that doesn't feel like an ending at all. It feels like integration, like everything you've learned, settling into a single, quiet truth. You are safest when you are most yourself. This is where protection stops being a strategy and becomes a state. You're not bracing anymore. You're not scanning for what might go wrong. You're present. And presence, when it's grounded, is disarming in the best way. It neutralizes chaos before it can attach. It keeps you rooted when situations try to pull you outward. You trust your internal compass now, not because it's never wrong, but because you know how to correct without self-betrayal. If you misstep, you don't spiral. You adjust. You learn. You return to center. That ability to come back to yourself is the deepest protection there is. Nothing external can replace it. You've also made peace with being misunderstood at times. You no longer see misunderstanding as danger. It's simply information. Some people don't have the context to see you clearly. Some never will. You let that be true without trying to fix it. You save your explanations for those who've earned them through consistency and care. At this stage, you don't confuse openness with exposure. You can be warm without being porous. You can be kind without being accessible to everything. You can listen without absorbing. That balance allows you to remain human without becoming depleted. You may notice that your life feels simpler now, even if it's full. Fewer emotional knots, fewer lingering conversations in your head, fewer moments where you wish you had said less or given less. Simplicity doesn't come from doing less. It comes from choosing more accurately. There's also a quiet confidence in how you move forward. You don't announce your intentions. You don't seek approval. You don't need witnesses for your discipline, your restraint, your growth. You know what you're doing and why. That knowing stabilizes you. You've learned that protection isn't about avoiding pain altogether. It's about not compounding it, not turning every discomfort into a story, not turning every challenge into an identity. You let experiences pass through without letting them define you. This final stage is marked by trust. Not blind trust in people or outcomes, but trust in your relationship with yourself. You trust that you'll notice when something's off. You trust that you'll respond appropriately. You trust that you can walk away when needed and stay when it's right. And because of that trust, fear loses its grip. It doesn't disappear, but it no longer leads. Awareness leads, discernment leads, presence leads. You're no longer trying to protect the version of yourself that was uncertain, overexposed, or leaking energy. That version taught you what you needed to learn. You honor it, but you don't live there anymore. Now, you live from center. From here, protection isn't something you remember to do. It's something that naturally happens when you choose alignment over urgency, clarity over explanation, self-respect over approval. This is what it looks like when a chosen one is no longer reactive, no longer porous, no longer negotiating their worth with the world. You move forward grounded, aware, intact, and nothing essential about you is left unguarded anymore.